What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Overreaction Monday show here on Orange Bloods Live. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That's Chad Hastings.
Whoa.
That is muscle memory kicking in. That is Anwar Richardson. I haven't even seen Chad Hastings this morning. Couldn't tell you if he's alive or not, but Anwar Richardson is.
He is.
This show brought to you by Rogue
Your news shows will take a drastic turn if he isn't alive.
Calling in favors will be the second time you see Anwar potentially sitting up here with me. The show brought to you by Rogue Shop, because clearly I haven't had enough of that so far this morning. Use the promo code Orange Bloods. Go to the website though, like it's real simple. RogueShop.com. Peruse the website. If you have any questions, Shar will be there to answer them in the chat. She is ready and willing to answer all of your needs and questions and make sure that you walk away completely satisfied. We love our partnership with the guys at Rogue. Anwar, we're a couple of days away. It's the 14th on Wednesday. The spring portal opens up in college football. It felt like this weekend, really, the portal was front and center with the Nico Iamaleava situation at Tennessee, which we've got to get into at some point, because I think you and I may have different views of that situation as a whole. I wrote a little bit about it in my 10 thoughts from the weekend, but you probably couldn't talk enough about that this weekend in college football. It was such a lightning rod story. And yet, man, what is about to happen in the portal feels so important for the Texas Longhorns, and a couple of names in the portal right now, including one that visited campus this weekend. The process has become, it really feels like, whatever the Texas Longhorns in 2025 are going to be, ultimately, that a big part of the answer to that riddle will be solved over the course of the next couple of weeks. Here we go, spring portal time.
Yeah, I mean, where do you want to start? Because there's so much meat on that bone. I mean, you know, this is for Texas. It's been a little bit of that game. You remember Double Dutch back when you were a kid, and you know, you're just waiting to get in, and it feels like someone's been, you know, got the rope going, and Texas is just sitting there waiting, and there's been this anticipation behind the scenes that they're really heavy to attack it. I thought about the Nico thing all throughout the weekend as well, right? And what that looks like. But we can start with UT if you want to, but it is an interesting thing as far as even UT avoiding that kind of calamity. Can I just say one thing real quick? Real quick. To the dad of Nico, who like ripped that reporter and just decided to fully blast him, only to have your son go into the transfer portal 24 hours later. You sir. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and defend On3 or anything like that, but I understood as a reporter, okay, you can't put that out unless you've got that pretty good from like someone inside the building, because they're not going to let you just damage and blow up their shit, right? And then the way the dad came at the guy only to be justified, man, it looked like an ass.
Yeah, well, you know what? One of the things I learned as a dad is like, that's just going to happen. Sometimes dads just have to be asses, and like they should know better, but something kicks in, and it did for him this week. And ultimately, we'll get back into that story in a little bit, because I'm telling you, once we start, I don't think there's any returning. We do have to talk about the law. Look, there's two things I want to ask you about, specifically player-specific guys for Texas. Because, and let's start with the most obvious one. EMTT Mosley visits this weekend. He is a second-year player out of Stanford. Really, by the end of last year, he was cooking. He had a monster game against Louisville, 13 catches. I was like $160, 3 touchdowns. Like, he was fantastic in that game. His numbers as a freshman, as far as I can tell, would rank in the top 5 all time in terms of true freshman wide receiver numbers at the University of Texas, if he had done what he did a year ago at Stanford at Texas. And yet, I don't think he's a natural skill set, even though Texas brings him in this weekend, on where I find myself thinking, they could really use what he brings to the table. Like, he would make I think this wide receiver group better and deeper. But I don't know that he fits the skill set of what ultimately Steve Sarkisian would love to bring in more than anything else. And I have a hot take. It's this. Didn't hear coming out of the weekend that they were really pressuring that kid at all. There's a part of me that wonders, do you tell him, do you slow play him a little bit? Because if you do, it's a real sign that they have indications, for my money, that there will be bigger and faster and more dynamic weapons that enter the portal than necessarily this kid. If they move all in, I don't think there's anything that would really keep them from getting him. It's the competition might be Virginia right now. He visited them earlier in the week. You no doubt would have seen a little bit of this guy's stuff on YouTube. You are probably like me now, a semi-quasi expert on Mosley because we've been forced to figure out like who he is and where he fits in. He does what for you?
He's my Silas Bolden of the transfer portal. What I mean, not by a size comparison. I mean, he's the third guy out of the guys that Texas would get, right? So he might be the guy that you're talking to, but you've probably got some other guys who are like, those are your big dogs that you really, really are wanting and really, really hoping. Now you'll take the Silas Bolden and you'll take what you get, whatever you can get from that. But at the end of the day, you're looking for that Matthew Golden kind of hit rate, right? You're looking for, Isaiah Bond, right? You're looking for those kind of things. And so I think that's why I say he's my Silas Bolden. He's your third guy. He's a good guy. He's solid. If you can get him, great, no problem. But I think if you're Texas, yes, you said, man, when Wednesday hits, that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for those guys who go, because by the way, there are some programs in the country that are wrapping up their spring ball, right? Texas is the only one that seemingly we got 2 more weeks. I'm like, what the? There's people having their spring games over the weekend. And Texas is like, we got 2 more weeks here.
We better not hear how difficult it is to manage both the spring and the portal at the same time. That was a conscientious decision. So I don't want to hear that.
Yes, no, 100%. But I think from what my indication is, Catch, what I feel like I've heard, they're looking for those studs. Like they're looking for that, like I said, the guys that I mentioned, and I think they're waiting to see, do those guys come out in this portal window? And if we do, now we're going to go ahead and look, it doesn't mean that Sark doesn't like Wingo or DeAndre Moore or anything like that. The same way he probably liked Jonte Cook, the other year, the same way he liked Wingo last year. Like all 2 things can be true, but at the end of the day, if you're Sark, you're telling yourself from the tight end. Well, hell, tight end. We'll get to that in a second. But
we will get to that in a second.
Yeah, but in the wide receiver room, you've got to have dogs, Catch. You've got to have dogs. And then the thing I just keep going back to, and I'll just continue to say, Catch, if you find a formula that works, the one thing you don't do after 2 straight semifinals appearances is go away from that formula. It would be the weirdest thing to say, you know what? Last couple of years, we've been killing it in the portal. We've been getting some receivers, man. I mean, we got Adonai Mitchell one year. Man, that guy, he's a 2nd round pick. Man, I got these other 2 guys last year. One guy might be the number 1 player in the draft. Now, listen, guys, hear me out. I've decided this year we're not going to do that. I've decided we're just going to go in growth and development and just play the young guys and see what happens. No! You stick with the formula that works, and the formula that works is go to the portal and get yourself some standout receivers, some studs, some speedsters. And that's where I think we're looking at what's going to happen over the next week or 2.
I always am highly amused when you and I are almost 100% in unison. It actually happens more than we think. We maybe hover in the 90% range, but I'm with you on Mosley. I think, ironically, I think Quinn Ewers would have loved this kid because he moves the chains. He kind of works the short intermediate areas like he knows what he's doing. And I think Arch Manning would probably like having this guy to throw the ball to. I think Quinn would have really loved him because I think he, more so than a lot of the guys, more so than a guy like Xavier Worthy, who needs the entire field. And boy, if you give it to him, can just destroy a team. This kid kind of works comfortably inside of a phone booth, catches the ball real well, can do things after the catch, but he's a guy that on 3rd and 7 will get you 8, or 3rd and 11 will get you 12. But he's not the guy that's going to get you 75 on any given play. And I think that's what they want. And I think you're right. His profile is, at best, he's your second best guy. Kind of depends on how many guys they would want to take in the portal. I think you could probably tell that guy, tell Virginia to slow their ass down a little bit. You're going to wait. You're going to take your time. You're going to wait a week. We need a week. Yeah. And because the thing about him is it's not a 1-year rental. So he's not Silas Bolden in that respect because he has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So to take this guy would mean it's like I know it's in this portal area, he could just as easily be gone in a year from now. But in theory, this means you like him more than you like some of the other second year. It might mean, do we like him more or do we like Aaron Butler more? Because if we bring this kid in, what's Aaron Butler thinking as a second-year player who maybe just had another guy with his eligibility profile land right in front of him? So I think that it's a little more complicated with this guy because of his profile, and I'm sure he's okay because he's at Stanford, but it is weird. These guys, I guess the younger they are, the easier it is to get them transferred in. It's when they're older guys that haven't graduated the Andrew Makubas of the world that can get a little tricky. Let's talk about this tight end, Anwar, real quick. And we can take some super chats. We can kind of bounce around all over. Yesterday, word gets out that Cal tight end Jack Indries is going to enter the transfer portal. 6'4", 240. He's got over 1,000 career yards receiving. I think last year he had over 600 yards and several touchdowns. 2 years of eligibility remaining. Yes. I don't think this guy's special by any stretch of the imagination. I think your hope would be that you've got a guy better than him. But it feels like he gives you some Juan Davis. Hey, he's played against ranked teams. He's experienced. He knows how to catch a football. They don't have a whole lot of that on the roster. I'm weirdly excited about a guy that I don't think is probably all that good, but sometimes all you got to do is be better than the guys you have.
I mean, all he has to do is be enough to be in the 2 deep, not even 2 deep because Texas runs 2 tight ends. Yeah. All he has to do is be better than Spencer Shannon and Will Randall at this moment. And you have a freshman who's going to come on campus later on, but I'm just talking about right now. That's all he has to be. And look, why I'm excited about it? I'm excited about. I would be excited about that because I've seen the scrubs that they've signed through the transfer portal from the tight end position the past few years. I'm like, look, give me the guy that checks the box. I'm sorry, all due respect, Jaleel Billingsley, Amari Niblack. That did nothing for this team.
With those guys, it's like, oh, they're talent. With this guy, it's like he's a good player. We're not talking about him as an NFL guy or anything like that. he can play football pretty well, and they could use a guy. I think I'll be stunned if Texas does not kick the tires on this guy, and he doesn't get in the way of anything. You can still go out and get a badass tight end if one still enters the portal, but Texas would. I'm trying to think like who the equivalent is on the Texas roster that he kind of represents, but he'd be kind of like the Cole Hudson of the tight end room.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to play him. No one's going to get crazy and act like he's all SEC. But the coaches feel safe when they put that guy on the field. Whatever we think of Cole Hudson in terms of, man, I don't know if that guy's going to play at the next level. I don't know if he's a high end. The coaches play him a lot, and I tend to think this guy probably would fit that kind of mold. He might be on the defensive side of the ball. Oh no, man! They got so many young guys over there. Probably
I got you. Who he is?
Who?
Go back in the time machine. He's your Zach Shackelford. He's good. Just good. That's it. He's good, right? That's where we're at. That's who he is. He's Zach Shackelford. He's good. But if all goes well, maybe he's an all conference, second teamer, third teamer, something to that effect, right? But yeah, I'm making it a goal to give Arch Manning as many options as possible. And if he's got to be the guy that gets in the room and it's musical chairs, well, let the music play and let's see who can sit down at this point. But what you can't do, especially that tight end room, is you can't have just a lack of options, because we're really talking about two tight ends at this moment. Catch. It's really Jordan Washington, Spencer Shannon. That's it. That's all we're talking about.
Can you imagine how excited we would all be if Juan Davis had one more year of eligibility?
Oh my God. You'd be thinking, man, Juan Davis could be an NFL draft pick.
Hey, breakout player.
Yes. Oh,
he
yeah.
Can do exactly what Gunnar Helm did, because that's what Jeff Banks does. He takes the next tight end and he turns him into a 40, 50 catch guy. Like, that's what happens. We say this a bit facetiously, but if Juan Davis, this is how I think dire the need at the tight end position is that Juan Davis is really probably what we're talking about with this Cal guy. He's good. You can have him. He caught the first pass of the game against Ohio State. He's good enough to have on the field in that game, but none of us, we weren't in the team's channel saying amongst ourselves, oh, it's going to be a Juan Davis breakout night. Get him the ball, coach. Can't funnel it to him enough. Like, you're not going that far, but when he's on the field, it doesn't feel like it's 10v11 either. So I think that, you got to have some guys like that. And I think that's where the portal can low-key do a lot for Texas, depending on how many guys they sign. We know they're going to be looking big at wide receiver. I think they'd love to have the right defensive tackle or even an edge guy go in. I don't think we're going to go crazy for a guy like David Bailey, but I think they would take another guy if they could. Sark indicated they wanted their defense. We know tight end. Like, there are going to be some positions where I think they'll swing big if they could. But there are also some positions where, and defensive tackle is one, and tight end is one, and wide receiver might be one, and they may not take a running back. But if the right guy became available,
yes,
and you had an extra scholarship late, running back could even be a position where just one more guy in there makes sure that you're good. And I'm reminded, I know you saw that this weekend too, that when the Mosley discussion broke out on Orange Bloods, someone posted, it somebody had made the comment of like, why would we want this guy? And then somebody posted a list of the injury report.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the running backs.
Position.
The running backs, yeah.
And you're just reminded that you're an Arsenal fan. Like, you run out of strikers and you just
Belton Gardner got injured. I mean, like Belton Gardner was unavailable at one point because of the number of injuries. And to your point, Catch, that's the David Bailey thing. When I was told was that it wasn't like they needed David Bailey, but hey, if you're available, we're not going to turn down talent. Like, are you interested? It just so happened that Texas Tech, at the end of the day, put so much money in front of the table that they're like, okay, we're not going to pay that much for David Bailey, but we're interested, right? And that's what's going to happen in the portal. To your point, if as much as Sark says, hey, I like my running backs, and much as people say, hey, we're good 1 through 5. If a badass running back came in there, Sark ain't gonna say, nah, man. What I don't need is more weapons. Like, we're good. No, he's gonna.
Onward, it's really interesting. I went back in my 10 thoughts from the weekend that I did yesterday. I went back and looked at, like, who should they have looked at? Was there anybody that they're having regrets on today because they didn't? They didn't get the guys that they brought in, but I think they did bring in the guys that they bring in. Singleton, they bring in Pregnon, the offensive lineman from USC who ends up signing with Oregon. We know they bring in Max Clare. Now, they didn't maybe go all out for Clare in a way that maybe now they could justifiably say, you know what, we're good. Let's give everybody's taken care of. Can we afford to give that guy $1 million? At least put Ohio State in a position where they have to fight for that guy instead of they kind of got him shooting from the layup line. They bring in David Bailey. They've brought in guys. What they haven't done yet, I would say, other than what I know, it sounds like they went pretty hardcore after Pregnon, and so did Oregon. And in the end, he just picked Oregon, but it wasn't because Texas didn't make a big offer. But I hadn't heard that they did that with anybody else. But Sark makes a point to get in with the top guys. They got in for visits, maybe more so than anybody else did. I don't know what it means other than a lot of people will talk about and focus on what they haven't yet done through the portal, what positions haven't been filled, and maybe they could have been more aggressive in December. But it's not for lack of effort and bringing guys in. I'm really actually impressed that they're always in the top 3 or 4 for most of the true prominent guys. It bodes well for whatever the hell is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Even guys that we knew Texas wasn't going to sign. I think Eric Singleton is a perfect example of that. We knew they weren't going to offer that kid $1.5, $1.6 million in the context of that exact moment in time. But they still brought that kid in and kicked the tires and explored that. And I think that it's a little bit like recruiting 5 stars. You're not going to get most of them. But when you do, it really matters. And I wonder if in a couple of weeks from now, some of this will look like it was practice on some level. Or if we'll look back on it and say, you know what, they brought those kids in, they had them right there. Maybe they needed to make the big sells and go YOLO a little bit more like Ohio State does, where they just say, we'll figure it out one way or the other at the end. Texas likes to be a little bit more specific with its planning, and thus they don't do a whole lot of YOLO.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, I think when you look, and I know Tracy, I know you got a super chat in there, you could again catch when you see the progression from Sark. One of the things I pointed out in my column, just from being kind of lukewarm to last year. I mean, they go into the portal and they get the Goldens and the Boldens and Isaiah Bonds, but you also get to Trey Moore, a Lole, a Bill Norton, a Savea, a Makuba, right? I mean, so that at that point, he realizes that, hey, man, they don't necessarily need to go YOLO and just get this one person, but we can get a whole bunch of good dudes. Because Matthew Golden wasn't YOLO at the time, right? That wasn't YOLO. That was like
a value buy.
Yeah, it really was. When you consider it now, that's a hell of a value buy that they were able to get on him. But it wasn't like, okay, we're going to overspend for what is considered the number one guy, right? I think they do a really good job of finding really good guys that they say, like, we can get this guy to the next level. But, again, even like the Isaiah Bonds of the world and Golden, like they were good at their programs, but they weren't what they were when they left Texas, right? I
don't know, man. Bond was a starter on a playoff team, and he caught the. Well, there's been some wacky plays in the Iron Bowl over the years, but he caught that miraculous play from Milroe on the last. I think what's really impressive is that Texas has no business getting Adonai Mitchell and or Isaiah Bond. Both of those guys were starters and projected 1A guys on returning playoff teams, and Texas was able. Now, look.
But Bond wasn't like a 1,000-yard receiver at that point, though, Catch.
No, he was like a 600-yard receiver.
Yeah, that's all I mean. Like, he wasn't that guy that you would say to yourself as a 1,200, 1,300-yard receiver. Kind of like, remember Texas the guy tried to get the guy from Pitt?
Yeah, Addison.
Jordan Addison. It wasn't like of that nature.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
But in terms of what was available in the portal, that was his top of the food chain.
Sure.
At the wide receiver. The next level up from that is a Ryan Williams or you know what I mean? They are tiers below those elite guys, but the thought process was when they got Bond, well, that guy has a chance to be a first-round pick. It didn't quite materialize like that. Ironically, Golden, I think, was thought of as, well, that guy will play in the NFL, but maybe he's a late-round guy. Maybe he's a special teams guy. Maybe – and then in the end is, well, maybe he's the first pick in the draft guy. And so an amazing event. One day, I really would love Matthew Golden to sit down for an hour and talk about his story, because he's one of the rare guys that's kind of highly recruited that signed with the Houston, and it worked out for him. That you can make the case that exact decision is what that maybe if he goes to Texas, he gets lost in the shuffle and doesn't stick around, enters the portal and goes someplace else. But he goes to Houston, proves that he's good enough to play at Texas, and then Texas brings him in. And because he's not possibly the number 12 pick in the draft if he stays at Houston this year. That only happened because he came to Texas, and it's a weird, kind of strange little world that because you could make the case if he signed with Texas out of high school that he might not have even been at Texas in 3 years with the way these things work today.
I've had a guy tell me that, does some training with, elite guys in high school. He said the formula he thinks is sign with not the top tier, but let's say like a Kentucky kind of program, go there, ball out, and then transfer, get your NIL and all those other kind of things. And it's like, if you go to these top programs and your ass sits and you get over recruited, you look at a guy like, Freddie DeBose, right? He goes in the portal. Yeah. But what if Freddie just went to, Tech, or what if Freddie went to Baylor or TCU? He probably wouldn't be a couple of years later saying, oh man, I guess I got to find a home.
You're 1,000% right, Tracy. For $2, super chat. Most effective recruiter on the defensive staff.
Well, we got two new DB coaches, right? So that's kind of a tough one.
Well, It's not Akina. I've covered Dwayne Akina long enough to know, like, he's not. He was never an elite recruiter when he was 50, let alone when he's 70. He's a good recruiter. He's not like incapable, but I don't think he's doing Kenny Baker stuff. It's either Nansen or Baker at this point. Crazy that Baker would have such a glowing resume, or could even be in the discussion after 1 year. But like, look, he made that. He gets tons of credit in year one he did the thing that nobody else was doing. He did the thing that Bo Davis wasn't doing. He got a 5-star to come in and Justice Terry. So, and I think Nansen has a long reputation of being a good recruiter, but that's not. They don't have. Sark's their guy.
Yeah,
and Sark knows that. The thing is, Tracy, you know what Sark knows? He almost feels like it doesn't matter who he hires because they have him. And if they have him, everything will be all right. And there aren't a lot of head coaches in college football that are the wolf in recruiting, but Sark is. It is one of his super skills. And the fact that he knows it, I think, is incredibly valuable because I think he's made hires with assistant coaches where he just hadn't cared a whole lot about proven records as recruiters because at most schools that would be a big deal. But at Texas, they have him in their hip pocket and Jeff Banks in another hip pocket if they need that, and a support system and analysts and all. Like, they just feel like they'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, they hired Chad Scott doesn't have a reputation as a recruiter, right? You know, developer. Akina, same thing. Developer. Baker has been a developer. Chris Jackson, developer, right? Those were just what he goes for. Like you said, he feels like he can do everything else at that point. They're
gonna leave here like the coaches at Alabama did at Saban. They're gonna have like the Sarkisian recruiter juice get sprinkled on them because all of a sudden, if Chris Jackson wanted to go someplace else. Well, he's Chris Jackson, a guy who's landed multiple 5-stars and did this. You know what I mean? It's going to be, and it's a whole lot of, well, you know, Steve Sarkisian is really good at this thing. All right, look, Anwar, we got to get you out of here in about a dozen minutes because Sarkisian, speaking of the devil, he's got a morning press availability after practice today. So there are time restraints on today's show. So let's spend the rest of the show talking about the Nico situation at Tennessee. I am not mad at anybody. I'm not. I have a hard time. It feels like Nico's the most hated man in college football, and I think that's really unfair. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes that caused him to push the red button the way that he did. But you know what? Sometimes a man's got to do what a man's got to do. He felt like that's what he had to do. Okay, you live with those consequences. Consequently, Josh Heupel had a metaphorical money gun pointed at his head. And had he caved in an inch, every guy in that locker room would have known, oh, so it's like that, huh?
Yeah.
And every college coach across America was watching that situation, thinking to themselves, come on, Coach Heupel. If you give this kid what he wants, every athlete across the country is going to try to pull this stunt on, or at least enough of them that our lives become more complicated than we want them to become. Josh Heupel says, not on my watch, not going to, we do not negotiate with terrorists. Okay. The problem is, Anwar, sometimes a man has to do what a man has to do. And Josh Heupel felt like he had to do what he had to do. I am not judging him for that. But he does not have a starting quarterback today. He does. That is a team that I looked it up. I was like, where were they ranked in all the preseason rankings? They were somewhere between 10 and 15 on almost every rankings list that I look at, squarely in the mix for a second consecutive playoff spot. And not giving in and just giving the kid the money that team might go from playoff level to 7-5. And if that's the case in January, is the moral of the story going to be, well, you know what? Pride's one of them 7 deadlies. And how about next time we don't lose an entire season out of pride? Like I'm fascinated by the fallout of this, almost even more so than what actually happened, because for every character in this play, there's a risk that this will work out really badly for everybody.
I think that for me, Catch, I think Nico received poor advice on how to handle the situation. I can understand his thought process on it, right? But what we can't do is you can't skip practice. Like you just at that day, at the end of the day, you can't hold out from practice. Like you're going too far at that moment. I let your people negotiate it behind the scenes, do what they're supposed to do. You don't get involved in that, right? Now when spring ball is done, and you're the quarterback. So Catch, it's not like you're going to get hit in practice. You get to wear a jersey that's red. No one gets a chance to touch you. So you don't have to necessarily do that. And I'm okay with the negotiation portion a little bit. And if you guys don't agree, you don't agree. But I think he handled it wrong by skipping practice. I think the dad handled it wrong by the words that he said, and kind of like I said, blasting a reporter to only 24 hours for your son to go into the portal. So you act like nothing's there, and then there's obviously something is there.
Has that ever happened to you on War, where you defiantly declare something only to 24 hours later just be like, oh, it wasn't like I even said that?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. If anybody hedges, I hedge probably more than most people do. So I don't really do. I can't think of something defiantly where I've turned back that. But what I won't do is knowingly know that something is going on and then just lie about it in the public to then look like an ass 24 hours later, right? So I get that whole thing, but there is this thing that happens, and you do see this whether it's Nico or other programs, and we've seen it before. You mentioned Jordan Addison. Sometimes the promises come in about you're going to potentially get this, and it doesn't happen for the player, and they feel a little screwed. And now if Nico was saying, "Hey, I want X," now that's a totally different thing because that's a negotiation. But in this world, though, what typically we see is that guys are showing up on campus, and then there's a whole lot of hemming and hawing about where that money is, because now all of a sudden it just kind of disappeared somewhere. And in the Nico situation, last thing I'll say on him is they have if you're Tennessee, you like you said, you can't be held hostage at that point. You have to let that guy go. It'd be interesting to see where he goes, because he can't transfer to an SEC school. Can't do that in the spring. So whatever he is out there. But there is a part of me that makes me wonder if Nico has talked to somebody and feels like, I already know what I can get. If you guys are going to do it, I'm going to go in here. So it is fascinating. By the way, his stats and his numbers don't justify a $4 million player.
No. However, I can, the thing is, I'm not trying to be a Nico advocate. I don't care enough to stand on the table for Nico, other than to say, in a very nebulous conversation about what is the value of a starting quarterback in the SEC at a good football program. And even a guy like Carson Beck, I think maybe even the perfect example, because in the end, we know what Carson Beck wasn't, which was a high-level NFL player. But the moment you took Carson Beck off of that team, They no longer were like with Carson Beck, a healthy Carson Beck, Georgia might win the national championship. I mean, they won the SEC championship with half of Carson Beck and then half of the guy that came in to replace him. But their national championship hopes went out the door the moment that he got hurt. So what is Carson Beck in a quantitative dollar amount? What was he worth to Georgia last year, Anwar? Not to any other team, just to Georgia.
I mean, he was worth something to them, but I don't think he was worth more.
It's a $1 billion sport.
You know what? Honestly,
hundreds of millions raised every year in revenue specifically created almost exclusively by the football program. The where he's the most important. I guess what I'm getting at.
He was important, but catch. He got hurt in that game against Texas. And the backup came in and had more juice than he did. And they gravitated more. Carson Beck, I mean.
What would Georgia have played in the SEC championship game if Carson Beck missed the entire year? I don't think with Gunnar Stockton they do.
You know what? At the end of the day, Georgia.
And I don't ride or die for freaking Carson Beck.
No. But at the end of the day, even Georgia was like, nah. Because you know what you're not hearing? Man, I wonder if Arch is worth whatever he's asking for. Right? They're like, nah, we're good. Whatever the asking price is for Arch, we have got that taken care of. But you've had guys that you could argue, catch. It'd just would be an argument that you can say, I think we could be okay without him. Like Carson Beck wasn't a standout against, Alabama when they played against him. He had 3 interceptions in that game. He had 3 interceptions against Texas, right?
I hear you. I do. And yet I still think he's better than Gunnar Stockton. And I say that with all due respect to the little bit of a jolt and shot in the arm that he gave that team in the game against Texas, which was more than Carson Beck was providing. I guess the only point that I'm making is even Carson Beck on a team like Georgia, if you told the Georgia athletic director at halftime of the SEC championship game, if the football gods had come down and said, you can keep Carson Beck whole for $4 million, but if you don't give us $4 million, he's out for the rest of the year. And you guys are going to go into the rest of this SEC championship game and then into the playoffs with, I don't know, who's your backup? Gunnar Stock? That guy. I think if you're the Georgia athletic director at that moment, you would have been like, okay, well, we'll cut a check for $4 million. We're not letting a season get away from us because we've chosen, this is something that you're volunteering for. You're either volunteering to not pay the money or you are. They would choose not to and then take that chance. I think in that moment they would. I'm just saying that whatever Nico is or isn't, what he is a returning starting quarterback on a playoff team from the SEC who was a 5-star quarterback prospect and whose second-year stats as a starting quarterback were on the level of Quinn Ewers is in that same exact situation when he would have been a first-year starter at Texas. Like apples to apples, nothing great, but he was the starting quarterback on a playoff caliber team and I think would have been a playoff caliber team this year. I'm saying you could make a case that anybody, forget about their name, that the starting quarterback at a high-level SEC football program's probably worth $4 million. That's all I'm saying is that they don't even necessarily have to be great, that their value, because the drop off to what's below them might be so significant that you might end up in a world where you had to overpay to keep one of those guys, because the downside is, like if you're Texas and you were given that, hey, either give us $10 million or Arch misses the 2025 season, they like Trey Owens, but they're not going to kill the entire season by not having Arch, you'd figure out a way. I don't know. I just think in 12 months from now, we may look back at all of this and go, wasn't that cute when a starting quarterback in the SEC only wanted $4 million a year?
I mean, that's fair.
And I'm just saying, we may look back and go, God, Tennessee went 7-5. Was that worth it? Because I think today there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, way to stick it to him. And it's like, I get it. I do. I understand where those people are coming from. But boys, starting quarterbacks are good things to have.
They definitely are if you're Tennessee, but they definitely felt like this guy wasn't. So it's a hell of it's an interesting gamble. You know, where Georgia said, "Hey, you're good," and Tennessee said, "Hey, we're good," and you know, so it'll be interesting to see what one guy does in Miami, what Nico does where he's at. All right, dude, I got to roll.
I know you got to. What a great watching Nico this year, wherever he is. Fascinating. Look, guys, we got to go. There's UT football stuff to do over on the 40 acres, and Onwar's got to get down there. Guys, Rogue Shot, check them out. Go to their website, rogueshot.com. They are the sponsor of the Overreaction Monday show. For Onwar Richardson and myself, have a wonderful Monday. We will. We want you to hit that thumbs up button, like, comment, subscribe, please, all that stuff. Leave comments, do that stuff. But we love you. You guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Take care. Later.